think we'll go ahead and get started then. And as others come, they are welcome to join us. But thank you to everyone who is here already. Delighted to have you with us in the audience, and delighted to have our panelists as well. By way of introductions, this is our annual International Education Week faculty panel. And the topic is the imperative for MSU to provide students with a global education. I'm delighted to introduce our presenters. I am Assistant Dean for Global Learning and Innovation and Executive Director of the Office for Education Abroad, Opal Lehman-Bargis, and very pleased to be with you today. I will be turning it over very shortly to our panelists, Siddharth Chandra, Professor in James Madison College and Director of the Asian Studies Center, Cholani Weebadde, Associate Professor in the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and Sara Bano, Assistant Professor in the College of Education. Each of the presenters will deliver 10 to 15 minutes responding to a set list of questions and prompts. And once we're done with all three, then we'll open it up for Q&A. So to give you a sense of the question, well, first I want to back up just a little bit and say that if you were with us last year, our presenters were Steve Esquith of Cal and ARCA, Julie Sinclair of the College of Education, and Carl Bollert, faculty in the College of Engineering, and they responded to a question about what makes for a meaningful institutional partnership in international education. So if you're with us last year, you may recall that that was a really thought-provoking session, and we have another session for you today that should be just as thought-provoking, if not more. And so the prompt was this: the MSU mission calls for the development of globally engaged citizen leaders. Academic disciplines can optimize opportunities for students' intellectual advancement and development of intercultural competencies when global perspectives are incorporated into campus-based curricula. The benefits of global learning need not be restricted to the mobile few who study abroad. Faculty panelists will respond to the basic question of why it is important for MSU to provide students with a global education, and will share advice on how global and intercultural dimensions can be intentionally integrated into the formal and informal curriculum for all students. And with that, I will turn it over to Siddharth.
Thank you, Opal. Can everybody hear me? Sounds okay? Great. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here today. My name is Siddharth Chandra. I direct the Asian Studies Center at Michigan State University. I'm also a faculty member in James Madison College. For those of you who are not from Michigan State, James Madison College is the College of Public and International Affairs at MSU, and so has in its curriculum, embedded in its curriculum, a variety of international themes and components. After reading Opal's prompt, I thought I would take a somewhat different tack from what I think Cholani and Sara are going to take today, and talk about my own personal experience with international education. Of course, the day I left India, my country of birth, at age 16, I embarked on a journey of international education, and it's a journey that continues to this day. It's one that's been incredibly enriching, wholly transformative, and what I'd like to focus on actually is the first 2 or 3 years I spent overseas outside India as a teenager. Before I do that, I'm just going to put up a couple of slides that I prepared. Okay. So the panel today, the focus is the imperative for MSU to provide students with a global education. When I read the prompt that Opal sent me in a little more detail, so she cited a study by Beelan and Jones, which offered a definition of the concept of internationalization at home, so right here, as the purposeful integration of international and intercultural dimensions into the formal and informal curriculum for all students within domestic learning environments, right? The second part of the prompt, so they explain, Beelan and Jones, the definition stresses intentional inclusion of international and intercultural aspects into curricula in a purposeful way. This implies that adding or infusing random internationalized elements or electives would be insufficient to internationalize a program. It also emphasizes the role of internationalization at home for all students in all programs. In talking of domestic learning environments, the definition makes it clear that these may extend beyond the home campus and the formal learning context to include other intercultural and/or international learning opportunities within the local community. These may include working with local cultural, ethnic, or religious groups, using a tandem learning system or other means to engage domestic with international students, or exploiting diversity within the classroom. And then finally, Opal's question to ask was, how would you respond to this definition and this framing of the concept? As the authors were primarily considering their own European context, what additional or different considerations and opportunities are important for global educators in the United States? What are some examples you have used or are thinking about for the purposeful integration of global and intercultural dimensions into the formal and informal curriculum? And what advice can you share with fellow educators on these ideas? So clearly, there's a lot more in this prompt than I think we can possibly address in the short span of, I think now I'm down to 10 minutes that I've been given. So what I thought I'd do is just talk about my personal experiences. And with that in mind, I'm actually going to focus, I'm going to take you on a little trip across the internet, across the web. I'm going to hop from website to website to try to illustrate the first international education experience I had, and to try to give you an idea of how transformative it was, but also to suggest that that may be a very interesting sort of experience to look at, from which maybe we can draw some ideas for what we do at MSU. All right, so that said, we're going to go onto the web. So what I want to share with you is a very interesting international education, I would call it a project. It's called the United World Colleges. The United World Colleges is, as you can see, I've popped up the Wikipedia page. Hopefully you all can see it. I'm going to just pick up a few snippets from the United World Colleges web pages that I think will give you an idea about how they try to accomplish what Opal has prompted us to think about and talk about. And perhaps we can think about ways in which we can draw from some of the things that they do to enhance how we try to accomplish what we are trying to accomplish here. So the United World Colleges, or the UWC, is an international network of schools and educational programs with the shared aim of making education a force to unite people, nations, and cultures for peace and a sustainable future. The organization was founded on the principles of German educator Kurt Hahn in 1962 to promote intercultural understanding, which, if you may recall, was one of the key phrases in one of the prompts that Opal gave us. Okay. Today, the United World Colleges consists of 18 colleges. They're called colleges, but if you want to think of it in the traditional sense, they're essentially high school level in terms of curriculum. They are high school institutions. Okay. Young people from more than 155 countries are selected through a system of national committees. By the way, these national committees are all volunteers. Okay, this is a completely voluntary effort. And these students go to these different colleges and pursue the International Baccalaureate Diploma. For those of you who may not be familiar with the IB, the International Baccalaureate Diploma, it's called the International Baccalaureate Diploma because it is very deliberately and overtly international in its orientation. Okay, so as part of the IB diploma, in order to earn one, you have to learn at least 2 languages. You can learn a third if you like, and a number of the other components of the academic curriculum are infused with learning opportunities from an international perspective. Okay, to date there are almost 60,000. I believe this may have been written some time ago. I think they're up to about 85,000 alumni now. Okay. So the alumni of the UWCs are all over the world. Let me just say a little bit about the colleges themselves. And I'll actually talk about the one that I was privileged enough to attend. And I should mention that I attended this college on a full scholarship because I came from a family that did not have the means to support me to attend this. So these colleges are very well supported by contributions from governments, philanthropists. And the idea is that a student who does not possess the means to go, if they're interested and they apply and they're selected, they will have the ability to go. So the one, I'll tell you just a little bit about the one I attended. It was the one in Canada, in British Columbia. It was founded in 1974. I attended it in the 1980s. And what made it a really different place, and I'm only thinking about this now in retrospect because I have children now who've also gone to school. There were 200 students at the school at the time. 100 were in grade 11 and 100 were in grade 12. It was on a tiny little residential campus far away, almost in a beautiful location, but some might say the middle of nowhere in British Columbia. There were 200 of us. We studied together. We ate together. From morning to night, we were doing something or the other together. Okay. The student body, 200 students, came in my time from about 70 different countries. I believe now 90 different countries are represented there. I remember in my first year, I was in a room with 4 students. I was the Indian kid. My roommates were from Kenya, Japan, and Quebec. In my second year, again, I was in a room with 4 roommates. My roommates were from Argentina, Poland, and British Columbia. Okay, so you may notice a commonality here in terms of who was in my room. There was always a Canadian student in my room. And so 1 out of every 4 students in this school is a Canadian student. Okay, so they are domestic students, but they're living in an environment that is overtly and heavily internationalized. Okay, I ended up doing 3 languages when I was there, including, of course, English. So I had the opportunity to learn new languages and participated in a whole variety of activities. I'm not going to have time to describe them. I'll just describe one of them. At the time, it was the school is located on the shore of the ocean. Actually, it's a strait coming in from the ocean. We were far away from the closest Coast Guard station. We had a small inflatable boat. It was not that small. It was large enough to tow fishing boats. We had a service called the Sea Service, where in our first year in grade 11, we were trained how to do emergency operations that were appropriate for high school kids. And in our second year, if you passed some kind of test, you became a skipper of the boat and you actually led outings to tow fishing boats that had broken down and rescue them and so on. And remember, your teams were always completely international. Okay, so I remember there was a time we went out. There was a student from Palestine on my crew when I was a second year student. There was a German student. This was just a completely international mix. So everything we did was in a heavily internationalized environment. Let me talk a little bit about what this does from my own experience to a 16-year-old. When you're 16, you're still pretty much a kid. At least I was very much a kid at 16. All right, and you're still growing up. But you're growing up with people who come from places with cultures that are, cultures you've never been exposed to. You probably couldn't imagine the way in which some people live and think at that age because you've grown up in your own, kind of little closed space. One of my best friends was from Pakistan. I'd never met somebody from Pakistan before that. We very quickly realized that we had a lot in common, and what we were reading in the newspapers maybe were not such a good, reflection of what was happening on the ground and who people in countries on the other side of the border were. These were all just to me totally transformative experiences. I'm not going to spend too much more time on this. The food was very international. Different kinds of food were served. It was cafeteria food, so don't dream of high quality gourmet meals, but there were, I think, really good, sincere attempts to try to, give students a taste of food from all over the world. And there was a lot of emphasis on cultural programming, and the kids, us kids, we brought whatever we'd learned from our home countries into the cultural programming mix. So all of this is to say that I think that there are a lot of the ingredients to create that kind of experience for MSU students are already here, right? Um, I think, I don't know about the logistics, but at least conceptually, we have dorms. We have large numbers of international students. We have large numbers of students from Michigan and other states in the US. We offer languages. We offer courses that are heavily international. The Asian Studies Center alone has 250 affiliated faculty members, okay? In fact, as luck would have it, two of my colleagues on the panel are affiliated with the Asian Studies Center as well. So we have every single ingredient that we need already on the MSU campus to make this experience happen if we choose to do so. And I'll just leave it at that, and I'm very happy to answer questions. I personally think it can be transformative. All it needs is some deliberate action, I think, on the part of people who are in positions to make this happen.
Thank you, Siddharth. And now we'll move on to Cholani.
Thank you, Opal, for this opportunity. It was really interesting to hear Siddharth's experiences. I think that's really exciting, and I think I will also kind of follow his strategy and talk about my experiences. But I didn't have those as a teenager, but I've had amazing experiences as a graduate student at Michigan State University, and then a faculty member where I got the chance to travel to over 25 different countries and learn from that experience and bring that experience into the classrooms at Michigan State. So I'm going to share a little bit about how I'm hopefully going to, like Siddharth said, use the pieces we already have at MSU to create that experience for students. So considering it's International Education Week, I'm going to start with this quote: "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." And so as a plant breeder, which is my training, what kind of change do I want to see in the world? And that is a world free of hunger and malnutrition. So plant breeders improve crops to feed people. And I'm saying this because of an experience I had traveling to Mali in 2006. As we were going from meeting to meeting, we were going from, we were walking on the street, and so many hungry children came to us asking for food. And it was a really tough situation for me because I didn't know who to help, how to help, and I kind of felt really, really helpless. So I went into the hotel room and I actually sat down and cried because I felt very helpless. And the first thing I actually did to get it out of my system was to write a letter to my parents to thank them for giving me a really good education so that I didn't have to end up being in the streets asking for food. And we know very well that this problem is not unique to Mali. Okay, it's all over the world. So if I want to see a world free of hunger and malnutrition, there's a huge challenge against us, right? We have to double current food production using fewer resources in a changing climate to feed an expected 10 billion people in the world by 2050. And just to make matters worse, out of all the land that is available in the world, only 10.8% is arable. Means we can only grow food in about 10%, 10.8% of that land. So, and the wars are currently destroying some of these amazing land we have to grow food. And these photographs are from Ukraine, and it just breaks my heart as a plant breeder to see a beautiful wheat field just being destroyed kind of overnight, and just to see the plight of this farmer here, just having lost all this crop that he had in the field. So how do we go forward, right? So what are we going to do about feeding people and nourishing people? Well, the U.S. State Department and with global partners, they came up with this idea of vision for adapted crops and soils. So what does that mean? That means just all of this time we have been working with a handful of food security crops to feed people, but they were not necessarily nourishing everybody. So the idea is to see if we could select some crops that are highly nutritious, that are locally used, and to improve them so that, because they're already adapted to a changing climate, and people are used to eating these crops, and maybe we can use these opportunity crops to feed and nourish people. But if you think about, as a plant breeder, if you think about the efforts that has been going into improving crops, they've been focused on those like very few handful of major crops, and there's not enough plant breeders. So who are going to improve these new opportunity crops? It's got to be plant breeders. So we do know that there is a need for trained plant breeders globally. And if we think about the students that we are training at MSU or beyond its borders, we know that their employment opportunities are going to open up around the world. It's not necessarily from the place that you originated from. So and 20 years ago, when I was a student, there was an article in Nature that said plant breeders are a dying breed. So that I felt that was my call to action, and I decided that, you know what, I really want to make a change, and I want to make plant breeders a thriving breed instead. So how do I do that? If any of you have heard of this famous quote from Mahatma Gandhi, it said, "You must be the change you want to see in the world." So I decided, okay, you know what? I need to be the change I want to see in the world. So I started training graduate and undergraduate students at Michigan State in plant breeding. And very soon I realized that I was just scratching the surface. Okay. I mean, like, even with years of work, I could only train a handful of students. And it's not just my program, it's also at Michigan State. We can only bring in a certain, like a limited number of students to MSU to train them, and compared to the global challenge we are up against right now. So when the pandemic happened, I decided that I'm going to take this plant breeding training global through online education. One of the first things I did was I developed an online professional certificate course called Plant Breeding to Fight Hunger. And we were, over the last 4 years, we were able to train about like over 200 students. And some of those folks who were in those programs were asking me, does MSU have any online degree programs for plant breeding? Because, it's very expensive to bring students here to MSU. And one of the things I realized with the certificate program was that the program had students from the US, and like from in addition to the US, another 20 different countries. So like Siddharth was talking, it was very international, and through discussion forums and exchanges, you could clearly see that students were starting to understand how things are different in different parts of the world. And that's the type of experience I wanted to bring into my teaching, because that's an experience I had by traveling to different countries around the world. And I just felt that online education provided an opportunity to bring all of that knowledge into one place. So I designed the Global Plant Breeding Online Masters Program, and currently we're accepting students for summer 2025. And I mentioned to you that I want this training to be globally focused. And the way we are doing that is, MSU has an amazing global knowledge network in different parts of the world. So by collaborating with CGIAR centers, National Agriculture Research Systems, universities around the world, with the private sector, what we are trying to do is bring their knowledge into this program, so that it's going to be applicable to anybody who's going to be trained as a plant breeder, and they will have knowledge to be able to apply for employment opportunities that open up globally. So, is this a new challenge? Well, if any of you read the book, The Man Who Fed the World, that's Dr. Norman Borlaug's autobiography, you will see that, well, he faced a similar challenge about feeding the world back in the 1950s and the 1960s. So, and he started with training plant breeders as well. So for me, and this is a famous quote that he said, "You cannot build a peaceful world on empty stomachs and human misery." So I think, we are really in the world today, we are seeing a lot of empty stomachs and human misery. So having met Dr. Borlaug in 2003 as a graduate student, that's me, near his feet, I was really, really inspired to do something to make a change, and MSU has provided me an amazing platform to do that. So I will end in this brief talk by saying that I have a dream. I want to follow in the footsteps of Dr. Borlaug as we strive to feed a hungry world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cholani. And finally, Sara.
So hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I think after Dr. Chandra and Cholani's presentations, my presentation kind of takes a different route. So I would be addressing the issue of global learning from more theoretical perspective. So let's see if I can move the slide. Yes. So some of the ideas which I would like to talk about are basically investigating some of these concepts and these ideas which we are trying to implement. So for example, the idea of global education and thinking about what were some of the historical context, evolution and interpretation of these terminologies which we are using, and also thinking about the framework and approaches for teaching and learning, how we should be thinking about these ideas in terms of implementing this work. So from global education, in terms of historical evolution of the concept, we think it has a very long-standing history in terms of thinking about very early in the 19th century, starting from the colonial and missionary traditions, and then led to the industrialization, which gave a lot of focus to the global education or thinking about global ideas. But during the World War I, II, and later in the Cold War era, we saw that global perspectives, quote unquote, were connected with the ideas of communism and socialism, and received some of the backlash around that time. So later in 1980s to 1990s, we see again a reverse of this idea of global education in our education systems. And some of the scholars in UK, especially like Richardson and Pike, they introduced the idea of global education. And that seemed pretty promising during that time, especially later on with the rise in globalization and technology. And also often, even when you look at the State Department website for global education for the US, there is a lot of focus on neoliberal and economic needs and demands for the idea for this traction to be used in the education systems. But I think there has been a lot of terms used over the period of time. So for example, thinking about global dimensions, creating global citizenship, global learning, global education. But oftentimes there has been a lack of clear pedagogical frameworks provided with these ideas. It seems pretty abstract in terms of that. So I think for me, because my work is very much situated in transformative learning, I feel it has a lot of connection conceptualizing these ideas from transformative perspectives. Even Dr. Chandra mentioned the word or term transformation. So this is exactly, this framework refers to that. So it assumes information, awareness, and learning has the transformative power and to change the world. And I think in terms of just current issues, we just, Cholani just mentioned global hunger and war as one of the few of the challenges we are facing. But other than that, we have climate change, sustainability issues, migration, identity, culture wars, poverty, pandemics, and growing inequalities. So how we should conceptualize or think about global education is in terms of engaging with complex global issues and combating injustice, prejudice, and discriminations in the world. So it's much more beyond that, just merely learning about other culture or making it more exotic, study abroad trip kind of an idea. It's the more critical, more social justice approach towards the global learning. So I propose the idea of global learning, which is already proposed by some other scholars, but thinking about what are some of the key tenets of this idea. So one is sense of global outlook. So we need to prepare undergraduate students or any students in our institutions who have a sense of global outlook, recognition of power and inequality. How does that work in the global or international spheres? Believe in social justice and equity, and commitment to reflection and dialogue as a methodology for transfer of information. And in this, we would see a lot of parallel how Cholani has done some of this work using some of these ideas. And this is for specifically, apart from mobility, like if we are not mobile, if we don't have the approach to go to the other country or the other culture, how we can use that or these ideas in our classrooms to support global learning. So in terms of developing a sense of global outlook, the idea of understanding global interconnectedness, I think that's really important idea. Mary Maffield's idea, world-mindedness, was another, I think, very important to think about it, and global responsibility. So these three ideas, I think, are very, very important to think about when we are talking about global learning. So explore one's place in addressing global challenges and accountability for global justice and sustainability. Thinking about the second tenet of this idea is recognition of power and inequality in the world. This is also very important. Thinking about power is multi-layered and is shaped by historical and contemporary forces. So globalization is not just about skill adaptation, or it involves more complex social, cultural, and economic imperatives. Colonialism's legacy continues to influence global inequalities and power dynamics. And moving beyond simple adaptation requires critical examination of ongoing power relationships and their efficacy on, or their effects on, local communities. So third tenet is belief in social justice and equity. So reflecting on social justice and personal values. Here it's very important to think about, reflect on what social justice means in diverse context, not applying only, Western or US-centric approach of social justice to the rest of the world, but thinking when we engage with rest of the world, how we are thinking about these terminologies and these ideas. Empathy and compassion, exploring how a desire for a just world is connected to personal values of empathy and compassion, and informed action, ensure actions are guided by knowledge and understanding. So these are not just merely based on the social media streams or how we are thinking about the world. Commitment to reflection and dialogue. I think here comes the educational part, especially thinking about critical thinking is important more than ever before, I think, in this time and period. So what is critical thinking? Thinking about your thinking while you are thinking to make your thinking better. So by Paul. So this is an idea that we need to challenge assumptions, critically examine personal views and stereotypes, questioning their origins, engaging in dialogue, foster understanding through conversation, leading to ongoing debate and shared inquiry. Reflection and reconsideration, the goal is not to change one's worldview, but to engage in continuous reflection and reconsideration. So for the curriculum development and for especially related to global perspectives or global learning, these are some of the questions we should consider. Number one, to what extent are connections made to developing a global perspective in curriculum design? How does the curriculum prepare students to understand global interconnections and issues? To what extent does the curriculum address the historical antecedents of colonialism? How are the divisions between the global North and global South explored, and what are their implications for societies, economies, and cultures today? So in terms of areas of learning for the global learning focus, communicate and participate, engage in the discussions on global issues and topics that can be done in the classrooms, question and challenge, question different worldviews, challenge different stereotypes, and critically assess perspective, listen and respect, understand and respect diverse perspective, self-reflective and open to change. This is very important aspect of global learning as well. So inculcating in students these abilities so they can reflect and cooperate and collaborate. So working with different groups of people in different settings is also very important. So what we can do as educators who are teaching on campus and are preparing students for next generations and are preparing to deal with these challenges. Number one, I think very important part of transformative learning is also reflection and dialogue. It is also an idea influenced by Paulo Freire and Jack Mesro, as I just mentioned, the transformative learning. So thinking about self-reflection is very important. Including that in our course designs would be a great idea to think about global learning. Facilitate discussions on diverse values, including different perspectives in our courses, in our materials, how we are engaging with that, incorporating global themes and promoting respect for diversity and collaborative learning. So collaborative learning is another very important way to engage, as Siddharth and Cholani both has mentioned, that we have these opportunities on our campus. We have all these resources available. We just need to think about how we engage with these and how we promote these ideas of global learning and how we engage with the rest of the world. Thank you so much. These were some of my ideas, and I would look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Sara, and thank you, all three of our panelists. We do have some questions that are coming into the Q&A. Siddharth, the first two are for you, and so I might just read both of them aloud, one after the other, and you can take your time in responding to them individually or combine them as you like. So Lynn Payne, College of Education, says, Siddharth's comments remind us that we need to think in the broadest meaning of education. Too often our thinking about learning out of the classroom is led by different people in different roles than those who think about learning in the classroom. How can we bring these two sets of people housed differently at MSU and this together? And this is a structural issue. What's your sense of how we can intentionally move in these ways that allow us to go beyond big ideas into concrete actions that have more coherence and intentionality? And then Doug Hartman asked, what are the deliberate actions at MSU that are needed for enacting the type of experience you had at Pearson College, United World Colleges?
I'll try to answer both in one because I'm mindful that Sara and Cholani, there are questions for them as well. So I'll try to make it compact. I'll just make two brief observations. So thank you to Lynn, I think in absentia, and also to Doug for your questions. Probably the most, at least from my own personal development perspective, I think the most important part of the experience I had at Pearson College was being put in an environment in which I was totally outside my comfort zone. It was just, I felt like, okay, yeah, I grew up, I'm 16 years old, and, I grew up with certain values and so on. And here I am with a whole bunch of people my age who in many instances have very different values and very different outlooks on life, right? And so, but in very close proximity, right? So there were 5 residential houses, and each house had 40 students, 20 on each floor, right, roughly. And everybody came from a different place. So, but you engaged and interacted and made friends. They're lifelong. Pretty much everybody who went to the school while I was there is a lifelong friend, and is somebody I can pick up the phone or WhatsApp with now that we have it, anytime, and just, you can get into a conversation like no time elapsed since the last time you saw them. So I think the first and most important thing is this idea of, very often global international learning is about being ready and understanding that you're going to step outside your comfort zone, and it's okay. In fact, it's probably a very, very good thing to do. In terms of concrete things, I've thought about it quite a bit, in my 15 years at MSU, partially because we have such a strong international and studies programs unit, and the university is so deeply committed to internationalization. I'll give you a couple of concrete examples, but they may be pie in the sky as well, right? I'm a faculty member in James Madison College. We have students of international affairs there, right? We're a residential college. We have rooms, right? When I look at who's in those rooms, right, very often it'll be a student from somewhere in Michigan rooming with another student from maybe 100 miles away, right? There's no reason it has to be that way. In fact, if students are interested in international learning, why not think about reconfiguring, the occupancy of the rooms so that every student from Michigan or from, we have students from all over the country actually, gets to room with somebody from a country far, far away, right? In my opinion, to the benefit of both, but I could be wrong, right? So that's one very simple little concrete thing you could do. There are some universities that have international dorms that are overtly internationally themed, right? So I know the University of Chicago has International House. There are probably other universities that are similar, right? And those universities actually, for the dorms, they'll typically have a balanced mix of people from the United States and from, I don't know how many different countries in the world, rooming with each other, holding international events and so on. But the reason I took the example of James Madison College first is that James Madison College has wired into its curriculum already, right, a very strong international component. It's one of the very few remaining colleges, I think Arts and Letters and ARCA may be the only other one or ones, that requires that you learn a language other than English as well, right? So over there, the lift would be slightly lighter in the sense that the curriculum is already there, the formal in-class curriculum. It's just a matter of complementing it and integrating it with a more of a lived internationalization at home experience, right? And cuisine, actually, honestly, if you go to our cafeterias now, I think we do a very, very good job of internationalizing cuisine. We have lots of cultural offerings. So I think there are ways to bring those pieces to bear on this more overtly internationalized experience. I think for other colleges and majors, there are also ways to do it. You can, because, if you're going to be an engineer, you have to focus a lot on your engineering curriculum. And there may not be a lot of room for an overtly internationalized academic curriculum. But I think there still is room. You could have a living experience that's internationalized, that perhaps has a 1-credit course that students take over the course of a year, where you have, a couple of speakers come in every month and talk about pressing international issues, political, social, environmental, some of the issues that Cholani and Sara talked about, but potentially also bring in, exposure to cultural variation from across the globe. So, those would be some of the things I would think about. Honestly, I being in Asian studies, my focus has been a little narrower, but I would imagine, there'll be logistics and you'll have to rethink a few things, but it should be doable. I think where there's a will, there's a way, and if any place can do it well, it's probably MSU.
Thank you, Siddharth. A question for you, Cholani. What is the size of the need for plant breeders globally? What is the time commitment to earn a certificate, credential, or degree to be a plant breeder? And are there layperson or amateur plant breeders?
Thank you, Oppo. So I am going to quickly, to be really honest, I don't know if people have actually counted how many plant breeders we will need. And it's going to be different as the visions are changing. Like we've been training plant breeders in some of the major crops and some of the very economically valuable crops. I breed strawberries, so that's one of the global crops. But I just quickly looked up a site that I have been kind of quoting. So if I quickly share this with you, there was this article that this is a 2016, so it's kind of old, but there was a White House blog on food and agriculture for the 21st century, and I just wanted to point you out to this. That they said a recent study by recent means, sometime back now, but recent study by the United States Department of Agriculture and Purdue University showed that the number of open positions in agriculture that require college level training exceeds the number of graduates by 20,000 positions a year. The deficit is particularly troubling in the field of plant breeding. So that is one of the things that kind of one of those call to action things. That's one of the reasons that I want to be in this area. And then the next question. So globally, it's going to be way more, right? And then if you, what is the time commitment to earn a certificate? So the certificate course I'm offering is a 14-week course, and then they have to submit assignments, and if they do not do over 90% of the assignments, they do not get the certificate. So because I want to make sure that if I'm training people, they need to be able to understand plant breeding. And then the credential, okay, so degree to be a plant breeder. So usually, I mean, we can't teach plant breeders everything because you can't cover all the crops around the world. You can just give examples of crops and how the process works. So, and then plant breeding evolves. Like what I learned 20 years ago when I was a plant breeding student, things have completely changed now. There's gene editing as a new tool that can be used. So, I mean, like, but the online certificate course not certificate, the online degree program, the master's program I have developed, it's if you're a full-time student, it takes 4 semesters, but there is also a hands-on component that is a part of this program where the students coming from wherever, around the world or in the US, they will select a local plant breeding institution to do hands-on training. And that is part of their independent study. And so the way that I've designed courses is that there's always an application of knowledge. And so my idea is by revamping some of the courses and developing new courses, we're going to train plant breeders who can hit the ground running. So they will get the coursework, and that way they will be able to apply when they focus on a local crop and traits to improve. So that's the vision, and I'm hoping that it's going to work, but I'm yet to find out. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And we have a question for Sara. How are other universities and organizations developing a sense of global outlook at scale? So all 60,000 students on a campus cultivate a deep sense through course and non-course experiences.
So I think it's very important to first of all think about how internationalization and globalization has been almost kind of compartmentalized as an idea that this is for specific people or specific times, or or it's just as it's a compartmentalized idea. Even when you have international global events on campus, you would see only international and global. Mostly international students or international people are participating in those events. So I think the proposed idea is much more in terms of like you incorporate this idea of global outlook in everything you do, in all the courses. It's not one course you offer or one program you offer. So if anybody is teaching, let's say, agriculture or economics or engineering, like I was teaching finance of higher education at one point in my previous institution. So I incorporated global perspectives, how higher education has been financed across in different continents, in different higher education systems. So like thinking about how we include this outlook in our curriculum as in general. So since this idea is not very old, and I don't think so there is a large implementation of this idea in terms of mass levels. So I think this is a flip people are now thinking or considering, and which is very recent. Like some of these ideas were just originated in 2011, so it's fairly new, 10 years, less than, almost 10 years or so. So maybe there is still a lot of, there is a lot to be done. Even thinking and conceptualization of this idea, how internationalization, like what does that mean? That's why we have so much contentiousness around these terminologies, like global, international, internationalization, and how we use these terminologies and these frameworks. So yes, this can be done for all the students. It's possible if we have this incorporation of global outlook in how we create these courses, how we teach these disciplines.
Thank you,
I
Sara.
hope I answered. Yes.
Yes, thank you. And it reminds me that the MSU mission calls for the creation of globally engaged citizen leaders. And that, of course, connects to a lot of what you said and much of what we heard from Cholani and Siddharth as well. And so if there aren't any other questions, which I don't see in the Q&A, I wondered if you could, if any of you, the three of you, would like to, or maybe all of you briefly, talk about the connections between what we've discussed here in terms of global learning and global citizenship specifically.
I think I can speak. I think I thought very deeply about this idea of global citizenship. Like when we think of international mobility, international travels, we really want to think about if we travel and then we are global citizen. But I think again, this idea of global citizen, no matter even if you live in a village, in a remote area, you're still a part of the world, right? And you still have accountability, you still have responsibility. So this idea of global citizenship also needs to be redefined and reconsidered and reconceptualized to some extent, because it's almost like, oh, if you are well traveled and if you have been to different cultures or you speak more languages, then you are a global citizen. But you're still the part of that world, regardless wherever you are or how many languages you speak. So thinking about global citizenship associated with global understanding of issues and global responsibility, I think that's very, very important from my perspective. Of course, those are the vehicles, travel is a vehicle. Coursework is a vehicle to lead you to better and probably more broader understanding of these ideas. But I think this is really important to think about global citizenship also from in parallel to global responsibility and accountability perspective.
So I think I'll add to that. With the mobile phones right now, like I had a student who took the entire online certificate course on a mobile phone. So I mean, right there, you can take your education global. You can, like my courses incorporate experiences from other plant breeders from around the world in the course. So whether you are in a remote village, all you need is a mobile phone. Like our D2L, our learning management system. If you design the lessons properly, And if you're paying attention to accessibility, it just nicely gets into your mobile phone screen, just the same you will see in a computer. So I think anybody can be a global citizen that way, with information at fingertips. That's my addition.
You want to round us out, Siddharth?
Yeah, just based on personal experience. I mean, to me, the first thing that comes to mind, I think, is recognizing our shared humanity. So, in some sense, you can put global in opposition to national or any other kind of, tribal, any other kind of line that might divide people. And I think really, first and foremost, it needs to be about, shared humanity. And, when I think about the community that I belonged to when I was a teenager, right, for those 2 years, it was everybody from everywhere, right? And they were all your people. So, I think that needs to be the starting point. And I think a lot of the other things they follow from it, right? And I think it's particularly important in these times because it seems to me that divides on the basis of identity seem to be getting exacerbated because of our ability to find our people, right? Defined in a much narrower sense than perhaps global citizenship would suggest. It's become a lot easier, and I think people kind of drift into their comfort zones, right? Which is why I think a really important aspect of international education, global education is somehow getting young people to realize that getting outside your comfort zone, right, is extremely important. And that's the starting point, I think, to global citizenship and a global education.
Thank you for those thoughts and wonderful reminders. And this has, as we suspected, turned out to be very thought-provoking. So I thank you again to our panelists. Thanks to our audience for joining us here. And I have placed in the chat the events list. So there's still much more going on this week to celebrate International Education Week. But you have our appreciation, panelists, for sharing your thoughts with us today. And we hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day.